The galaxy is vast, cold, indifferent. It hums with the silent song of dead stars and the slow, grinding dance of nebulae older than time. And into this ancient, uncaring void, humanity stumbled, latecomers, loud and utterly unprepared. We called it the Great Silence. We were wrong. The silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. For 3 centuries, the Terran Concordance clawed its way outward from Sol, a fragile bubble of oxygen, steel and stubborn hope. We found wonders, crystalline forests on Proxima Bob, oceans of liquid methane on Titan's distant cousins, ruins whispering of civilizations dust for millennia. We thought we were alone in our ambition. We were wrong again. They came from the Veil Nebula, a region shrouded in electromagnetic static, deemed impassable by our best astrophysicists. They called themselves the Cathar Collective. Not a nation, not an empire, but a symphony of minds woven through quantum-entangled bio-neural networks. Their ships weren't vessels. They were living organisms, grown, not built, pulsing with internal bioluminescence, like captured constellations. Their warriors weren't soldiers, they were harmonizers, bioengineered extensions of the collective will, moving with eerie synchronized grace. To them, individuality was noise, chaos, a flaw to be corrected, and humanity was the loudest, most discordant noise the galaxy had ever known. The war began not with a declaration, but with silence. Entire colonies, New Carthage, Elysium Prime, the fragile hydroponic arcologies of Ceres Station simply vanished. Not destroyed. Scanned, analyzed, and then dissolved into base elements by the Cathar's terrifyingly efficient matter reclamation fields. No survivors. No demands. Just the chilling void where thriving human outposts once blazed. The Concordance reeled. Panic, like a virus, spread through the core worlds. We scrambled fighters, fortified borders, screamed into the static for answers. The Cathar offered none. They saw us not as enemies to be reasoned with, but as a cosmic infection to be cleansed. Our very existence, the messy, unpredictable, individualistic spark of human consciousness, was an affront to their perfect, silent harmony. On the scarred surface of Mars, in the shadow of the rust-red Olympus Mons, the Concordance made its stand. Not with grand fleets. Those were shattered in the initial devastating strikes, but with grit, desperation, and the one thing the Cathar couldn't comprehend, the human capacity to endure the unbearable. Deep beneath the Tharsis bulge, carved into the planet's ancient bedrock, lay Bastion Prime. It wasn't just a military base, it was humanity's last gasp. A tomb waiting to be sealed, or a crucible waiting to forge something new. Inside Bastion's command center, the air tasted of recycled oxygen, ozone, and the metallic tang of fear held barely in check. Holographic displays flickered with the grim ballet of the outer defenses, tiny human icons winking out against the encroaching tide of Cathar biosignatures. At the center of it all stood Commander Ilara Vance. Not tall, but radiating a stillness that seemed to anchor the chaos around her. Her face, etched with lines deeper than her 40 years, held eyes that had seen too much vanish. Her uniform was immaculate, a stark contrast to the frayed nerves of her staff. She didn't pace, she observed. Every flicker of a dying ship, every spike in Cathar energy signatures, every whispered report from the crumbling perimeter. Status on Perimeter Gamma? Her voice was low, calm, cutting through the low hum of machinery and the tense murmurs. Lieutenant Aris Thorne, young eyes wide with the weight of his first major engagement, swallowed hard. Holding Commander. Barely. Their reclamation fields are adapting. Faster than our countermeasures. He gestured to a display showing a section of the planetary shield grid flickering erratically. They're learning our patterns. Of course they are, Vance murmured, more to herself than to him. They see us as data points, predictable variables. A flicker of something dangerous crossed her face. Anger. Yes, but beneath it a cold, calculating resolve. Tell Gamma to shift to randomized evasion protocols. Sacrifice efficiency for unpredictability. Make us noise they can't filter. Orr nodded, relaying the order, his fingers flying over the console. Vance turned, her gaze sweeping the room, landing on the figure slumped in the corner observation blister. Dr. Kalen Rowe, the Concordance's lead xenolinguist and cultural anthropologist, once hailed as the architect of humanity's first failed attempts at peaceful contact with the Kothara, he now looked like a ghost haunting his own failure. His usually sharp eyes were dull, fixed on the swirling red dust storm outside the reinforced viewport. His hands, once steady enough to calibrate the most delicate resonance scanners, trembled slightly. "Rowe," Vance's voice softened. "Just a fraction. Anything, any shift in their comms, any anomaly in their biosignatures that might hint at hesitation?" Rowe didn't turn. His voice was a Rav's, scraped raw by sleepless nights and the crushing weight of guilt. "Hesitation implies doubt, Commander. The collective doesn't doubt, it processes. It corrects. We sent them poetry, music, the Declaration of Universal Rights. They scanned it, categorized it as biological waste product, and dissolved the transmission array." He finally looked at her, his expression hollow. "They don't see us as people, Alara. We're just static, an error in their perfect signal." Before Vance could respond, the entire bastion shuddered. Not a gentle tremor, but a deep, visceral thump that rattled teeth and sent sparks cascading from an overhead conduit. Klaxons, previously a low thrum, erupted into a piercing, soul-chilling wail. Red emergency lights bathed the command center in blood. "Direct hit on shield generator 7, Thorne yelled, his voice cracking. "It's gone. Perimeter Gamma is collapsing." On the main display, a section of the holographic shield representation dissolved into static. Through the viewport, visible even through the dust storm, a section of the Martian surface rippled. Not an explosion, but a terrifyingly smooth, silent wave of distortion spreading outwards. Where it passed, rock, regolith, even the reinforced ferrocrete of Bastion's outer defenses simply unraveled, dissolved into shimmering motes of light that were instantly absorbed by the advancing Kothar bioship hovering low in the thin atmosphere. A leviathan of chitinous plates and pulsing internal veins of sickly green light. "They're inside the perimeter," another officer screamed. "Ground forces engaging." Vance was already moving, her calm shattered, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of a predator. "Seal sections. Theta through Kappa. Activate internal defense grids. Thorne, get me a tactical overlay of the breach point. Rowe." She paused, her eyes locking onto the xenolinguist, who had finally risen, his face pale but his eyes suddenly alight with a desperate, manic energy. "Rowe, with me. Now." She didn't wait for an answer, striding towards the blast doors leading to the lower armory levels. Rue stumbled after her, the tremor in his hands replaced by a strange urgency, as the heavy doors hissed shut behind them, sealing them in a dimly lit corridor echoing with distant booms and the sharp crackle of energy weapons. Vance finally spoke, her voice tight. "What is it, Kalen? What aren't you saying?" Rose stopped, leaning against the cool metal wall, breathing hard. "It's not just static, Alara," he whispered, his voice trembling not with fear now but with a dawning, horrifying realization. "Their comms, the bioresonance patterns. I've been filtering it all as noise, as their language. But there's something else woven in, faint, buried deep, like echoes. Whispers trapped in the signal." "Whispers of what?" Vance demanded, her hand resting on the grip of her sidearm. Rahl met her gaze, his own filled with a terror that went beyond the immediate battle. "Regret." The word hung in the recycled air, heavy and impossible. Before Vance could process it, the corridor lights died. Emergency strobes flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows. From the direction of the breached perimeter, a new sound cut through the din of battle. A low, resonant thrumming, felt in the bones more than heard, accompanied by the wet, clicking skitter of chitinous limbs on metal. They weren't alone. Vance drew her pulse pistol, the weapon humming to life with a soft blue glow. Ruel fumbled for a sidearm he rarely carried, his hands shaking again. The thrumming grew louder, closer. Around the bend in the corridor, the emergency lights glinted off polished, obsidian black carapace. A harmonizer, not the hulking biotanks they'd seen on the surface, but a sleeker, faster variant, its multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp manipulators and energy projectors. Its single, multifaceted eye glowed with cold, emerald light, fixing directly on them. It raised a limb, the energy projector at its tip beginning to pulse with building power. Vance raised her pistol, aiming for the eye cluster. Ro froze, paralyzed. The harmonizer's limb snapped forward. Crack. Not the harmonizer's weapon. A high-velocity round fired from behind them, punched through the alien's carapace just below its eye cluster. The creature spammed, its thrumming cutting off abruptly, and collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. Vance spun, pistol still raised. Emerging from the shadows of a side passage, smoke curling from the barrel of a heavy-caliber rifle, stood Sergeant Jax Rourke. His face was smeared with grime and dried blood, one eye swollen shut, but his remaining eye burned with fierce, protective fire. Behind him, a handful of battered, exhausted Marines formed a ragged line, their weapons trained down the corridor. "Commander, Doc," Rourke rasped, his voice rough as Martian grit. "Bastion's crawlin' with these damn bugs. We gotta move. Now." Vance lowered her pistol slightly, relief warring with the grim reality. "The breach point." "Contained for now, ma'am," Rourke interrupted, stepping forward, his rifle sweeping the corridor. "But they're digging in, like termites in rotten wood. We need to fall back to the core bunker, now." His eyes flickered to Rao, then back to Vance, a silent question in his gaze. "Can he run?" Vance nodded curtly. "Move out." "Rourke, point." "Roar, stay close to me." She grabbed the xenolinguist's arm, pulling him along as the Marines formed a protective shell around them, moving with practiced urgency down the shuddering corridor. The distant booms of battle grew louder, punctuated by the chilling, wet thwack of Cathar bioweapons and the sharp retorts of human firearms. They rounded a corner, heading for the central lift shaft that led deep into Bastion's heart. The lift doors were open, revealing the dark shaft beyond. Rourke signaled for silence, peering down. "Clear," he hissed. As they stepped towards the edge, a section of the ceiling directly above them exploded inward, not with fire but with a shower of dissolving ferrocrete and writhing segmented tendrils. A larger harmonizer, a bio-titan this time, dropped into the corridor, its massive form blocking their escape route back the way they came. Its multiple limbs slammed into the floor, cracking the reinforced plating. Its central maw opened, revealing rows of crystalline teeth that began to vibrate with the same terrifying thrumming sound. "Fall back," Rourke roared, opening fire. His rounds sparked harmlessly off the Titan's thick carapace. Other Marines joined in, their weapons barely scratching the surface. The Titan ignored them, its focus entirely on Vance and Roe near the lift shaft. It took a heavy step forward, the floor groaning in protest. Vance shoved Roe towards the lift. "Go. Get down." Roe stumbled, falling to his knees at the edge of the shaft. He looked up, not at the advancing Titan but past it, down the dark corridor they'd just fled. His eyes widened in pure, unadulterated horror. "Elora," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Vance followed his gaze. Emerging from the smoke and dust, moving with that same eerie, synchronized grace, came not one, not 10, but hundreds of harmonizers. A silent, relentless tide of chitinous death, filling the corridor from wall to wall, their multifaceted eyes glowing like a field of malevolent emeralds. They weren't attacking the Marines, they were advancing inexorably towards her. The Bio-Titan before them raised a massive limb, energy crackling around its manipulator, aimed directly at the lift shaft, and the two humans trapped beside it. Rourke and his Marines were pinned, their fire useless against the sheer numbers and the Titan's bulk. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Vance met Rotter's terrified eyes. In that final suspended moment, as the Titan's weapon charged to its peak, humming with lethal energy, she saw not just fear but the echo of his earlier impossible word: regret. The Titan's limbs snapped forward. The energy blast didn't hit. Not directly. At the last possible microsecond, Rourke lunged, shoving Vance and Roe bodily into the dark lift shaft. They tumbled down, the world a blur of falling metal and screaming wind. Just as the Titan's weapon discharged, the concussive force slammed into the lift car above them, tearing it from its guides. Molten metal rained down, searing the air. They hit the bottom of the shaft with bone-jarring force, landing in a tangle of limbs on the cold, grated floor of level Sigma, the core bunker access. Above the sounds of the Titan's frustrated thrumming and the desperate futile gunfire of Rourke's squad were abruptly cut off by a sickening wave of silence. The sound of matter dissolving. Vance pushed herself up, gasping, her ribs screaming. Ro lay beside her, moaning softly, clutching his arm. The lift shaft entrance was now a jagged hole spewing smoke and the acrid stench of ozone and burnt flesh. "Rourke," Vance whispered, the name catching in her throat. She knew, they all knew. Sacrificed. To buy second. Heavy blast doors slammed shut at the end of the access corridor, sealing level Sigma. The relative quiet was deafening, broken only by their ragged breathing and the distant, muffled thumps of the Cathar assault on the upper levels. Bastion Prime was dying, floor by floor, section by section. Inside the core bunker, a reinforced sphere of durasteel and lead deep within Mars's crust, the last remnants of Bastion's command huddled. The air was thick with despair and the smell of unwashed bodies. Holographic displays showed only static or the grim advance of Cathar biosignatures, consuming the base. Thorne was there, his youthful optimism replaced by a shell-shocked numbness. A few dozen Marines, their faces etched with exhaustion and grief, stood guard, and Ro, pale and trembling, sat slumped against a console, his injured arm crudely bandaged. Vance moved among them, not with orders, but with a quiet presence. She checked wounds, shared sips of water, met each pair of haunted eyes with her own steady gaze. She was the rock in the storm, the last ember of defiance. But inside, the image of Rourke's sacrifice, the silent tide of harmonizers, and Ro's impossible word, regret, churned like acid. Days bled into a timeless haze of tension. The Cathar didn't rush. They methodically dismantled Bastion, layer by layer, their reclamation fields dissolving everything in their path. The core bunker's shields held, for now, powered by the last of the geothermal taps deep below, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. The Cathar would adapt. They always did. It was during this grim vigil that Ro finally broke his silence. He approached Vance as she stood watching the main shield integrity display flicker ominously. "I was wrong," he said, his voice raw but clear. "About the whispers." Vance turned, her expression unreadable.
"Wrong how?"
"Not echoes," Ro insisted, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "Not buried signals. It's them, the harmonizers, the individuals within the collective." Vance frowned. "The collective is the individuals, Ray. That's the whole point. They're hive mind drones." "No!" Ro shook his head violently. "That's what they want us to believe. What they believe, but the bioresonance. It's not just a carrier wave for the collective will. It's layered. Beneath the dominant harmonic there are dissonances. Faint, suppressed, but there, like thoughts trying to surface. Thoughts of what they're doing, what they've done." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "When they dissolved New Carthage, I detected a spike in anomalous resonance within the harmonizer units involved. A pattern that matched human neural signatures associated with acute distress, with remorse." The Vance stared at him, the implications crashing over her. "They're saying the harmonizers feel guilt for erasing us?" "Not guilt as we know it," Ro clarified, his mind racing. "But a cognitive dissonance, a fracture in their perfect harmony. The act of dissolution, it's not clean for them. It leaves residue, echoes of the consciousness they erase, and those echoes, they resonate within the harmonizers. They feel the loss. They just can't process it, can't express it. The collective suppresses it, labels it static, noise, but it's there. It's regret." The word hung in the stale bunker air, heavier than before. Vance looked at the faces around her. Thorne, the Marines, the engineers, all marked by loss, by the Cathar's relentless erasure. What if the monsters dissolving their worlds were themselves haunted? "Can you reach it?" Vance asked, her voice low, dangerous. "Can you amplify it? Make the collective hear its own dissonance?" Ro's eyes widened. It's theoretically possible. If I could isolate the specific resonance frequency of the suppressed dissonance, modulate our comms array to broadcast it back at them. Amplified, it might cause a feedback loop. A moment of cognitive rupture. It's suicide, Thorne cut in, his voice tight with fear. Our comms array is on the surface. It's been slagged. Not the main array, Ray countered, the spark of his old brilliance returning. The deep-range Ansible relay. It's shielded, buried even deeper than we are. It's designed for FTL comms, but its resonance chamber, it could be jury-rigged. It's our only shot. Vance looked from Ralgai's desperate hope to Thorne's terrified pragmatism. Outside the bunker, the thumping against the shields grew louder, more insistent. The Qatar were close, very close. This was madness. A gamble based on the whispered regrets of their annihilators. But what was the alternative? Wait to be dissolved. Die quietly in the dark? Show me the relay schematics, Vance said, her voice hardening with decision. Thorne, assemble a team, volunteers only. We move in 1 hour. The journey to the Ansible relay chamber was a nightmare. They navigated service tunnels choked with smoke and the lingering stench of dissolved materials. Qatar patrols were everywhere. Silent, efficient, deadly. They moved like shadows, using the base's own infrastructure against its defenders. Twice, they had to backtrack. The wet skittering of harmonizer limbs echoing terrifyingly close. Rourke's sacrifice wasn't unique. 2 more Marines fell silently in the dark, buying precious seconds with their lives. Finally, they reached the massive vault-like door of the Ansible chamber. Inside, the air hummed with latent power. The relay itself was a complex lattice of crystalline conduits and humming energy cores, designed to punch signals through the fabric of space-time. Ro worked frantically at a console, his injured hand clumsy but determined, rerouting power, bypassing safeties, his fingers flying over the interface. Almost got it, he gasped. Need to isolate the dissonance frequency, amplify it through the primary emitter. Vance stood guard at the chamber entrance, pulse pistol ready, listening to the ominous silence outside. It was too quiet. The captor knew they were here. They were waiting. Russo, hurry, Thorne urged, his voice tight. Got it. Rose slammed a final command. The crystalline lattice in the center of the chamber began to glow with a soft, pulsing light, not the Kiethar's sickly green, but a deep, resonant blue, broadcasting the dissonance signature. Amplified. Full power. For a moment nothing happened. The hum of the relay deepened. Then outside the chamber a new sound emerged. Not the Qatar's thrumming, but a chorus of confusion. A discordant, almost pained keening that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. The synchronized movements of the harmonizers outside faltered. Their emerald eyes flickered erratically. It's working, Thorne breathed, hope flaring. But the hope was short-lived. From the corridor, a new presence emerged. Not a harmonizer, but something larger, more imposing. Kanthar conductor. Taller than a man, its form was smoother, more elegant, woven from strands of iridescent biometal. Its face was a smooth, featureless oval, but Vance felt its attention like a physical weight. It radiated an aura of cold, absolute authority. The collective's will made manifest. The conductor raised a single, slender limb. The discordant keening of the harmonizers instantly silenced, replaced by a wave of pure, crushing order. The dissonance broadcast from the relay chamber flickered, the blue light dimming under the conductor's focused will. No! Ro cried, frantically adjusting controls. It's suppressing it, overriding the feedback. The conductor took a step forward. The massive vault door groaned, then began to dissolve from the edges inward, the metal unraveling like wet paper. Fall back, Vance ordered, firing her pistol. The energy bolts splashed harmlessly against the conductor's biometal hide. The Thorne and the remaining Marines opened fire, their weapons equally useless. The conductor ignored them, its focus entirely on Ro and the relay. Ro looked at Vance, his face a mask of despair and sudden terrible understanding. It's not just suppressing the dissonance. Alara, he yelled over the rising hum of the dissolving door. It's absorbing it, using it to strengthen the collective will. My broadcast, it's making them stronger. The devastating revelation hit Vance like a physical blow. Their last hope wasn't just failing. It was actively empowering their enemy. The conductor stepped through the dissolving doorway, its presence filling the chamber, radiating cold finality. The relay's blue light guttered and died. The conductor's smooth face seemed to turn towards Ro, not with anger, but with a chilling, analytical curiosity. It raised its limb again, not towards the relay but directly at the xenolinguist. Energy, pure and white-hot, began to gather at its tip. Ro didn't flinch. He looked past the conductor, past Vance, his eyes wide with a dawning horror that transcended his own impending dissolution. "They don't just regret us," he whispered, his voice filled with a terrible epiphany. "They regret themselves." The conductor's weapon fired. The white-hot energy beam lanced out, impossibly fast. But Ro wasn't its target. At the last instant, Vance threw herself in front of him. The beam struck her center mass with the force of a meteor. There was no explosion, only a terrifyingly silent unraveling. Her uniform, her skin, her very bones dissolved into shimmering motes of light, instantly absorbed by the conductor's outstretched limb. One moment she was there, a pillar of defiance. The next she was gone, erased. Like New Carthage, like Rourke, like everything the Cathar touched. Rose stared at the empty space where she had stood, a choked sob escaping his lips. Not just grief, but the crushing weight of his failure. His broadcast had doomed her. His understanding had been useless. The conductor turned its smooth face towards him, the energy weapon recharging. But Roa didn't cower. Alara's sacrifice, her final act of protection, ignited something in him. Not hope, but a cold, furious clarity. He saw it now. The conductor hadn't just absorbed the dissonance. It had consumed Alara's essence, her indomitable spirit, her very humanity. And in that consumption, for a fraction of a second, Roa saw it. A flicker of something in the conductor's smooth facade. Not pain, not regret, as humans knew it, but a profound, cosmic dissonance. A shudder in the perfect harmony. Alara Vance, even in her dissolution, had left a mark, a scar on the collective's perfect silence. The conductor raised its limb again. Ro closed his eyes. Red. Thummim. The entire chamber shook violently. Not from the conductor's weapon, but from a massive explosion outside. Alarms blared, not Bastion's alarms, but a different, harsher tone. Human alarm. Through the dissolving doorway, chaos erupted. Not Cathar biotanks, but battered, scorched human dropships, Ares-class gunships, slammed into the corridor, their heavy cannons roaring. Marines in scorched armor poured out, laying down withering fire, not the ragged defenders of Bastion, but fresh troops, reinforcements. Concordance fleet. Hold your positions. A new voice barked over the comms, sharp and authoritative. Admiral Corvus, commander of the Third Fleet, thought lost at the Battle of the Belt. The conductor, momentarily distracted by the sudden assault, hesitated. Its smooth face seemed to ripple. The absorbed dissonance, Alara's defiant spark, warred with the collective's imperative. In that split second of hesitation, a Marine sergeant, seeing Roke cowering near the dead relay, lunged forward, grabbing him and dragging him back towards the advancing human line. "Move, Doc! Now!" the sergeant yelled, shoving him towards a waiting dropship. Rose stumbled, looking back just once. The conductor was turning, its energy weapon flaring, unleashing a wave of dissolution that vaporized 3 Marines instantly. But the hesitation had cost it. The human assault, fueled by desperation and the element of surprise, was pushing the Cathar back, if only for a moment. The core bunker wasn't saved, but it was no longer a tomb. Rao was bundled into the dropship, the ramp slamming shut as it lifted off amidst a storm of Cathar energy fire and human counter-barrage. Through the viewport he saw Bastion Prime, the mighty fortress of Mars, crumbling, sections dissolving into shimmering clouds under the relentless Cathar assault. But the human fleet, What remained of it was fighting with the ferocity of cornered animals. They weren't winning, but they weren't vanishing quietly. The dropship shuddered as it broke atmosphere, climbing towards the relative safety of the Concordance fleet holding position in high orbit. Rose slumped against the bulkhead. Alara's absence of physical ache. He looked at his hands, the hands that had tried to understand, to communicate, to find a way out that wasn't just more blood. They had failed. Catastrophically. But Alara's final question echoed in his mind, cutting through the despair. She never asked why they attacked. She asked what they regret. He hadn't understood then. He thought it was about finding weakness, a chink in their armor. But now, watching the Qatar bioships weave through the human fleet, dissolving fighters with chilling efficiency, he saw it differently. Alara hadn't been looking for a weapon. She'd been looking for humanity. Even in the monsters erasing them, she'd sought the spark of something relatable, something that could feel, and in her final act, she'd proven it existed. The conductor's hesitation, the flicker of dissonance. The Qatar did regret, not the act of war perhaps, but the cost of their own perfection. The loss of something they couldn't name, buried deep beneath the collective will. The dropship docked with the UNS Dauntless, Admiral Corvass's flagship. The bridge was a scene of controlled chaos, damage reports, tactical updates, the grim faces of officers who'd seen too much. Corvass himself, a grizzled veteran with eyes like flint, turned as Ro was brought in. "Rayoa, you're alive. Where's Vance?" Ro couldn't speak. He just shook his head, the image of her dissolving replaying in his mind. Corvax's face hardened, but he nodded curtly. "Then her sacrifice bought us this." He gestured to the main view screen. The battle raged. Human ships, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with suicidal bravery. Qatar bioships, sleek and silent, dissolved them one by one. The Concordance fleet was being systematically erased. "We can't win this," Admiral Thorne said, his voice hollow, standing beside Ro. "Not like this. They adapt too fast. They just dissolve us." Corvax slammed a fist on the console. "Then we give them something they can't dissolve. Something that sticks." He turned to Ro, his eyes sharp. "Your broadcast, Doctor. The one that failed." "Tell me everything," Ro explained, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. The dissonance, the regret, the conductor's hesitation, the way Alara's essence had caused a ripple. "It's not a weapon, Admiral," he concluded, his eyes burning with a new kind of fire. "It's a mirror. We don't fight their strength. We show them their own fracture. We make them see the cost of their silence." Corvax stared at the viewscreen, watching a Qatar bioship dissolve a human cruiser. He saw not just destruction, but the act of erasure. And Russell words clicked. "The Anselu relay," he said slowly. "It's gone. But the Dauntless, it has the main fleet comms array. Powerful enough? Powerful enough to broadcast across the entire engagement zone," Ro confirmed. "If we modulate it with the dissonance signature, amplified by her," he couldn't say Alara's name, "by the resonance of her dissolution, it's the purest, strongest signal of human defiance we have." Corvax didn't hesitate. "Do it, Thorne. Get him to comms. Give him everything he needs. And Ro," the Admiral's voice dropped, low and fierce, "make it hurt." The Dauntless comms array, usually used for fleet coordination, became Ro's instrument. He worked feverishly, his injured hand forgotten, his mind a whirlwind of equations and resonance frequencies. He didn't just use the raw data from Bastion. He wove in everything. The final transmissions from New Carthage, the screams from Elysium Prime, the defiant last stand of Rourke's squad, the silent courage of Alara Vance's final moment. He didn't broadcast noise. He broadcast memory. He broadcast loss. He broadcast the very essence of what the Qatar were erasing, and the echo of regret it left behind in their own fractured minds. "Ready, Admiral?" Ro said, his voice hoarse but steady. His finger hovered over the transmit key. Corvax looked at the viewscreen. The human fleet was down to a third of its strength. The Qatar Armada, a silent, implacable wall of bioorganic dread, advanced. "Do it," Ro pressed the key. The broadcast wasn't sound. It was a wave of pure amplified dissonance, a symphony of human grief, defiance, and the Cathar's own buried regret, pulsed outwards on every frequency, riding the Ancibila's FTL carrier wave. It washed over the battlefield. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The Cathar bioships continued their relentless advance. Then, the conductor-class ships leading the armada staggered. Not physically, but their movements became jerky, uncoordinated. The smooth, synchronized dance fractured. Bayou ships collided. Reclamation fields flickered erratically, sometimes dissolving chunks of their own ships. A low, agonized keening, magnified 1,000-fold, emanated from the Cathar fleet, the sound of a billion suppressed regrets suddenly screaming to be heard. The collective will, the perfect harmony, was experiencing a catastrophic feedback loop. The mirror Ro had held up reflected not just the cost of their actions, but the unbearable weight of their own suppressed dissonance. The regret wasn't just for humanity, it was for the loss of self inherent in their perfect unity. The erasure of others was erasing them. Now, Korvax roared. All ships, concentrated fire on the conductor class. Target their neural nexus points. The battered human fleet, sensing the enemy's sudden vulnerability, unleashed everything they had left. Torpedoes, railgun slugs, plasma lances, a final desperate storm of fire focused on the faltering conductors. One by one, the massive Cathar command ships shuddered under the onslaught. Their biometal hulls cracked. Internal bioluminescence flared erratically, then died. They didn't explode, they collapsed, dissolving from within, consumed by the very dissonance they had tried to suppress. As each conductor fell, the chaos in the Cathar fleet intensified. Harmonizer units froze, their movements becoming random, confused. Some even turned their weapons on each other. The tide of the battle didn't just turn, it shattered. The Cathar armada, the silent, unstoppable force, fragmented into a cloud of disoriented, self-destructing bioships. The human survivors, battered but alive, watched in stunned silence as their annihilators unraveled not by human weapons alone but by the unbearable weight of their own hidden sorrow. The victory was Pyrrhic. Mars was lost. Bastion Prime was gone. Countless lives erased. But the Cathar armada was broken, retreating in disarray back towards the Veil Nebula. Their perfect harmony shattered, haunted by the echoes they could no longer ignore. Weeks later, Rose stood on the observation deck of a hospital ship orbiting the ruins of Mars. Below, the red planet was scarred, silent. He held a simple data chip, the only physical remnant salvaged from Bastion's core bunker. On it was the final, uncorrupted recording from the Ansible relay chamber, the moment of Ilara Vance's dissolution and the conductor's fleeting ripple of dissonance. He hadn't spoken much since the battle. The weight of what he'd done, what Ilara had done, what they'd all lost was immense. But he understood now. Ilara's question hadn't been tactical. It had been profoundly, devastatingly human. In the face of annihilation, she hadn't sought justification for the enemy's cruelty. She'd sought the spark of shared feeling, the possibility of connection, even in the heart of the destroyer. She'd asked what they regretted, because she knew that regret, that capacity for sorrow, was the thin, fragile thread that connected all sentient beings, even those who sought to erase others. He looked out at the stars, the vast, indifferent galaxy. The Cathar were gone, for now, but the silence they left behind wasn't empty. It was filled with the echoes of loss and the quiet, persistent hum of a question that would linger long after the guns fell silent. He never asked why they attacked. She asked what they regret, and in that question, in the answer she forced them to confront, lay the only victory worth having, the proof that even in the darkest heart of the galaxy, nothing, not even perfect harmony, could truly silence the echo of a soul. The regret wasn't humanity's burden alone. It was the universe's shared wound, and acknowledging it, even in the act of erasure, was the first, fragile step towards something else, something that wasn't silence, something that might, one day, sound like understanding. Ro closed his eyes, the data chip warm in his hand, and listened to the quiet hum of the ship, the distant stars and the unanswerable, echoing question hanging in the void.